Hello, dear learners. Today we are going to see about two important personalities in the field of linguistics and ELT. They are B.F. Skinner and Noam Chomsky. So let's get to know a little more about B.F. Skinner. So B.F. Skinner, he lived between 1904 to 1990, and his full name was Verhulst Frederick Skinner, and he was an American psychologist, behaviorist, art author, inventor, and a social philosopher. So he also worked as a professor of psychology in the Harvard University from 1958 until his retirement in 1974. So he terms his philosophy as radical behaviorism. And we see that some of his notable discoveries or contributions were towards the field of psychology. And these were the prominent contributions of Skinner. So they were the operant conditioning process, which Skinner refers to in his theory of learning, the notion of schedules of reinforcement, how reinforcement is essential in the process of learning. Next, the introduction of response rates as a dependent variable in research. So the response rate of the learner is recorded and how it helps in research. So that was also one of his contribution. Another important contribution of his was the creation of the cumulative recorder to track response rates. So, just as the learner is learning and as he is responding, he created a device to record all the response and to see the rate of responses. So these were some of the major contributions of Skinner. So we've also seen Skinner's contributions earlier in his language of or his theory of learning. We've already seen in the audiolingual method. So I will be discussing more about our next personality, who is Noam Chomsky. So Noam Chomsky was born on December 7, 1928. He is also an American linguist. He's a philosopher, cognitive scientist, historical essayist, social critic, and political activist. And this generation, we are lucky to have Noam Chomsky amidst us. And we see that from time to time delivers lectures. And we see he is also called the father of modern linguistics and father of language development. So the major contributions of Noam Chomsky is that according to him, that children have the innate ability to learn grammar and language. So his theory is known as the psycholinguistic theory, where he puts forward the idea that language and grammar is already a skill that is innate inside the learner. And moving on to his theory of language development, it was propounded in the year 1959. And according to his theory, he says that the ability to learn a language is innate for the child. So it is already inborn. The child already has it when the child is born. And language is also was inherited. It is present at the time of birth. And at some particular point of life, it gets activated and the learner starts speaking or producing the language. And we also see that he also says that the ability to acquire language, it lasts only for a certain period of time. To be specific, up to 5 years, language acquisition is very active. But then after that, language acquisition, there are difficulties that arise in the learning of language. And we see that language learning keeps decreasing in the process of a person's life. So these are some of the claims of his theory of language development. And he also makes one important remark or one important concept which he puts forward in his theory of language development, which is that a child has a language acquisition device called as LAD inside him. So it is like it is already there in the brain. It is a device that is part of the brain, and it is already a natural gift or a natural ability which is there in the child at the time of birth. And we also see that he says that Chomsky believes that the child's ability to learn a language is innate, it is inborn, and we see that environment and the culture does have a place in the process of learning a language. So, language learning is not it is not independent of environment and culture. So it is dependent, it is based on environment and culture. So one last point about his theory of language development is that his theory had a foundation in cognition and development psychology, and so its focus was on the form and structure of the language. So emphasis was on phonemes, morphemes, lexicon, syntax, grammar, semantics. So all of you are aware of all these terminologies. You've studied them in linguistics. So I'm not, explaining them further over here. So he believes that along with cognition, also structure of the language is also focused upon in language development. So these were, some of the important points of his theory. So moving on to the features of his theory. So the features, there are five important features. The first is the innate ability. Second is importance of the environment. Third is the relationships in language. Four is LAD. And then we also see universal grammar. So moving on to his concept of innate ability, we already saw in the previous slide the importance of environment. Also, we saw how language learning is dependent on the learner's environment. And we also see that he makes another claim, which is that there is interrelationship between languages. There is, interrelationship between the languages of the world, meaning that every language can be divided based on nouns, verbs, and adjectives. And universally, all languages have it. And we also saw what was LAD in the previous slides. And universal grammar. He says that along with learning of grammar, the amount of grammar learning and correctness in it also keeps on increasing. So he says that the ability to learn grammar keeps increasing, and he also reiterates that the process of learning language and learning grammar is universal. So no individual learns language separately and grammar separately, or it's there in one language, it's not there in the other. No, it is prevalent universally. So every language, there is a process of learning and a language of, and there's also learning of grammar. So it is universal. And he also talks about surface structure. So in surface structure, he says that children acquire the knowledge of sounds and words of language, but they also do not understand the meaning. So he talks about two types of structure. One is surface structure, the other is deep structure. So surface structure, the learner just learns the structures, the sounds, but they don't know the meaning. For example, like a baby, the baby imitates and learns food, drink, mom, dad, but actual meaning they don't understand. But when they go into deep structure learning, what happens is they not only learn the words, but they also learn the meaning of those words. They not only learn the sounds, they also understand, what is this reason behind those sounds. So, and they are able to choose over here, like, okay, there's a choice of different words, and they are able to choose and use language according to the need. So this is a mature form of linguistic development. So that's deep structure learning. Whereas in surface structure, it is not much. So these are the two levels of language acquisition which Chomsky has brought about. And to conclude about Chomsky, we see that he says that his theory that the process of development is based, the process of learning is innate, and we also see that it is systematic description of the development of language, and the ability to learn also is done by him. And to differentiate or to say what is there, the difference between Skinner and Chomsky is Skinner gave an environment explanation, whereas Noam Chomsky gave a biological explanation. Skinner said that the environment has a role in the language acquisition process. So there is a learner, there is a stimuli in the environment which helps the learner respond. So stimuli response was what he focused upon. But Noam Chomsky goes further and he talks about the biological explanation he gives of what happens inside, what is the cognition process that is involved in the brain, how the brain functions. So here is where their views differ in the form and the function. Biological theory, it promotes that the use of regularities is in segmental phonology, sound sequences, and phontic probability. But in environment, it conversely it promotes the use of naturalistic teaching methods. And we also see the other terminologies that are associated with the environment theory. So these are the major differences or the differing points of Skinner's and Chomsky's concepts. So with that, we come to an end of today's session. So today we got to see a little bit about Skinner, and majorly we saw about the contribution of Chomsky towards the field of ELT, and we see how these two giant names have contributed profoundly to the development and to the ideologies and concepts in ELT. So thank you everyone for joining today's session. Continue learning and happy learning. Thank you.